Palace also released a statement from Meghan's mom, Doria Ragland, that she, quote, looks forward to welcoming her first grandchild.
This latest fallout, according to Radar Online, was specifically over...
Grandma has arrived. Meghan Markle's mom, Doria Ragland, has reportedly arrived in the UK all the way from Los Angeles to be...
In May 2018 at Windsor Castle, cameras from around the world followed one striking image. Doria Ragland walking alone. No husband. No relatives beside her. Just calm, poised, and self-assured. In that moment, she became a vital part of Meghan's public story. She made the narrative feel believable. Criticism aimed at Meghan seemed to lose force around her, because attacking the daughter risked seeming heartless toward the mother. In many ways, Doria became the emotional shield of the Sussex image. Then, she reportedly left the Montecito home. Meghan is said to have pleaded, "Don't leave me," but Doria still went. No public comment followed. No interview. No explanation. That silence is what stands out most. Doria Ragland has never given a public interview at any stage, not before the wedding, not during the royal years, and not afterward. That goes beyond staying private. It suggests intention, and choices like that rarely happen without a reason. Long before Meghan became royalty, sat down with Oprah, or appeared in the Netflix documentary, there was already a clear picture of Doria in the public mind. The caring single mother, the yoga teacher, the steady woman who raised her daughter with quiet strength. That image was not built through statements or media appearances. It was built through photos of a woman with dreadlocks holding flowers at a charity event, a proud mother at graduation, a face that gave off warmth and peace in every shot. By the time global attention arrived, that image was already firmly in place. It worked because it was direct, relatable, and deeply human in a story that quickly became far more complicated.
Mother Doria Ragland over just 2 words. Now, you'll know things have not been good.
As palace friction grew, tabloids kept circling, and family relationships broke down. Doria remained the one part of Meghan's story that felt untouchable. No one could easily challenge what she represented. She seemed to confirm that Meghan's kindness was real, that her values came from somewhere solid, and that the woman at the center of the royal wedding had been raised with real care and stability. Doria became the emotional base that held the whole story together. The wedding locked that image in place. In May 2018, Thomas Markle dropped out just days before the ceremony, and the reasons were already turning into headlines the Sussex team could not manage. The seat next to Meghan in the car, the place a father would normally take at a royal wedding, was left empty. Doria became the focus instead. She sat alone in the chapel at Windsor, with no wider family around her, no visible backup. Just a calm, composed woman in mint green, watching her daughter step into history. At the same time, the Markle side was spinning into public disorder with staged paparazzi shots, missed travel plans, and rival interviews playing out in full view. Doria did the opposite. She stayed quiet and said nothing. That contrast felt too exact to be random. The message coming through in real time was clear. This was Meghan's true family. This was her real foundation. And this was the part people were meant to trust. From that point on, Doria was more than the mother of the bride. She became a built-in layer of protection around the Sussex image. Criticizing Meghan's character could feel like criticizing the woman who helped shape it. Questioning Meghan's past could seem like questioning the mother who gave her that grounding. That emotional effect made attacks on Meghan seem not only harsh, but mean. Her presence was used with remarkable care. She appeared when the story needed warmth, credibility, and emotional weight, whether in the documentary, the jam jar moment, or other public appearances. And when she was not needed, she disappeared from view. There were no off-the-cuff interviews, no loose comments, and no public words that had not been tightly controlled.
Then she wants nothing to do with you. But Doria's just not keen. She's no longer at the house. She's no longer playing a...
In 8 years of one of the most heavily covered public sagas in the world, Doria Ragland was never seen in a setting that was not carefully managed. Every image, every appearance, every piece of footage fit a controlled version of who she was. The public was given a picture of her that felt flawless and beyond challenge. That is why one woman's steady claim that this image had been carefully built was both hard to accept and easy to brush aside. By the time Meghan's relationship with Harry became public, Samantha Markle had already been cast in a fixed role before most people even heard her out. She was labeled the bitter, jealous half-sister, someone unimportant trying to profit from a connection to fame. That narrative formed fast and stuck hard. It did more than make her look bad. It shut her down. Once she was framed as an attention seeker, almost nothing she said had to be taken seriously. People focused on who she was supposed to be, not on what she was actually saying. And what she was saying was not vague or emotional complaining. She kept pointing to specific weak spots in the story. She raised clear questions about dates, documents, and accounts from people inside the household she had actually known. She highlighted exact contradictions. She pointed to missing pieces in the timeline. She suggested that parts of the past had been edited before the public ever saw them. She did not make those claims once or twice when the spotlight was on her. She repeated them over years, again and again, with a level of detail that is hard to maintain if it all comes from simple resentment. Still, the media response barely changed. She was treated as tabloid clutter, as someone who did not matter. As the part of the Markle family story people were meant to dismiss.
Are you cashing in?
She probably thinks that I'm cashing in. So, no, if I wanted to cash in, I would go.
That, in turn, supported exactly what the Sussex story needed people to believe. That Meghan's distance from her relatives made sense. That it was justified, and that cutting ties was the only sensible response. Then Tom Bower entered the picture. Bower is not a tabloid commentator. He is an investigative biographer known for taking apart carefully managed public images, including those of Robert Maxwell, Conrad Black, and Richard Branson. These were powerful men with full public relations teams, legal pressure, and strong efforts to suppress damaging reporting. Bower dug through those layers and recorded what he found underneath. His reputation rests on solid sourcing and careful fact-finding. He does not speak loosely. In 2023, after publishing Revenge, he said something direct and public. "We laughed at Samantha and she was right, and everything she said has come true." Read that carefully. This was not gossip or a casual opinion from a columnist. It came from one of Britain's most established investigative writers, a man whose work depends on evidence and accuracy, saying that the woman the media had dismissed for years had been telling the truth all along. That statement shifts the entire picture. If Samantha was right in a factual, detailed, and structural way, then ignoring her was not simply a fair reaction to an unreliable source. It was part of a larger process. The constant noise around her served a purpose. The more her credibility was attacked, the less attention people paid to what she was actually saying. And beneath all the headlines, ridicule, and years of being brushed off, the person she kept pointing toward was Doria. Not as a villain.
I did was that Samantha Markle's action for libel, defamation against Meghan. She's
not as a villain, and not in a cruel way, but as the key figure in a story built around a version of her that relatives said they did not recognize. That alone makes the construction worth examining. The image of Doria as the devoted, ever-present mother had one ongoing weakness. People who had actually lived with her described something more complicated. Not someone terrible, but someone whose role in Meghan's life was less constant, more uneven, and far more selective than the public version ever admitted. That gap is not some small side issue. It sits at the center of the whole story. Samantha said it plainly on the record. Thomas, not Doria, raised Meghan for most of her childhood, especially from age 12 through high school. Those are not minor years. Ages 12 to 18 are the years when a person's character, trust, habits, and values are deeply shaped. They influence the choices that carry into adult life. If Doria was mostly absent during that period, then presenting her as Meghan's main formative influence is not just incomplete. It is a very different version of events. Thomas Markle paid for Meghan's private education at Immaculate Heart. He drove her to auditions. He helped build the practical and financial base for the early career that is now often framed as the result of Meghan's ambition alone. His role was real, documented, and substantial, yet it is mostly missing from the public story Meghan has told about her background. Thomas and Doria divorced when Meghan was 6. According to Bower's reporting, Doria's life in the years that followed, and her role during Meghan's childhood and teenage years, was far more complicated than the polished public image ever allowed.
the person who controls the narrative. She controls people. She ghosts people like her father or the royal family when she doesn't like.
The details are layered. What comes through from people who actually had direct access to that home is very different from the image presented at Windsor in 2018. These are two sharply different accounts of the same childhood, told by people who lived through the same years in the same family, around the same person at the center of this story. The public was given one version because that version served a purpose. The other version, from Thomas, from Samantha, and from the material in Bauer's reporting rather than the Sussex documentary, raises questions the first version seemed carefully built to stop people from asking. If Doria was not the steady, devoted, deeply shaping presence the public story needed her to be, then the entire origin story changes. And once the origin story changes, everything built on top of it stands on different ground. This is not some minor update to a public biography. In a story that has asked the world to choose sides in a painful family split, and that has framed Meghan's breaks from the palace, her father, and her sister as the understandable choices of a woman shaped by sincerity and grace, it matters a great deal who actually shaped her. The story needed Doria to represent something very specific. So that is how she was presented to the world, again and again, in every image that stuck. But the question of who she really was to the people who saw it from the inside is still there in the public record, waiting to be compared with the version people were sold. Up to this point, all of it was visible to anyone paying close attention. The crafted image, the buried contradictions, the family accounts left out of the documentary. These are the kinds of gaps that often appear in public stories built around private lives. They are uncomfortable, worth looking at, but still open to debate. A loyal audience could still choose to overlook them.
Hey, they won't know my ISP if I do this through a VPN. So it makes it harder for law enforcement to get them.
What changed in 2022 falls into a different category entirely. That year, Doria Ragland took on the roles of CEO, CFO, and secretary of a Delaware-registered company linked to Meghan. That meant she held 3 top executive positions at once. This stood in sharp contrast to the public image built around her for years. A yoga teacher, a social worker, and a woman presented as warm, grounded, and far removed from business strategy or corporate ambition. There was no press release, no public explanation of her qualifications for those roles, no major coverage, even from outlets that had followed nearly every Sussex move in real time, from production deals and podcast launches to charity filings and brand partnerships. Media organizations that had reported on the smallest details of Meghan's public appearances somehow said nothing when her mother became the chief executive, chief financial officer, and secretary of a commercial entity. That does not look like a simple miss. It looks like something few people were meant to notice. Choosing Delaware is not some casual paperwork decision. It is a deliberate legal choice often tied to liability protection, tax advantages, flexibility, and privacy. Companies are set up there for clear structural reasons. That kind of move suggests planning and awareness, not guesswork. Yet Doria, whose public profile had been kept far from the world of corporate power, was placed at the top of all 3 executive functions. The real question is not whether Doria was able to do it. The real question is why she was the person chosen at that exact moment to hold those exact titles.
Honest, to work on apologies to everyone that they've damaged in the course of this.
Corporate officer roles are not symbolic. They come with legal risk, formal duties, and a clear place on official records. They matter. The timing makes them even more important. This happened at the exact point when Meghan was rebuilding her business identity after leaving royal life, when every decision tied to the Sussex brand carried major financial and legal consequences. The structure being created in that period was not routine paperwork. It was the base for everything that would come next. At that same time, Doria was also being publicly placed in a very different role. She was shown as the person receiving jar number 1, the first as ever strawberry jam Meghan made. Before the celebrities, before the influencers, before the press, there was Doria. The message was clear, warm, and easy to understand. She was being presented as the most important person in Meghan's life, the emotional heart of the story, the person it all came back to. But the jam jar told one story, and the Delaware filing told another. The gap between those 2 images, between the loving mother shown to the public and the corporate officer placed quietly inside the legal structure of the business, is too large to ignore. A mother being honored with a homemade jar of jam is a personal and touching image. A mother at the same time serving as CEO, CFO, and secretary of a commercial entity without any public announcement is a business decision made for a reason. Both things can be true, but they are not the same thing. and the fact that the public was shown only one of them says a great deal about how carefully that line was being controlled. By early 2024, the commercial comeback was clearly losing momentum. The $20 million Spotify deal, once presented with great excitement as proof that the Sussex brand had real independent power, was over. It had been terminated,
with Spotify saying they have mutually agreed to part ways and they are proud of the series.
We laugh and we have a lot of fun.
The public explanation was creative differences, but the reality was much harsher. A major business partner ended one of the platform's biggest podcast deals after just one season. That was not a simple disagreement over ideas. It was a clear judgment. The animated Netflix project Pearl was also canceled before it ever reached viewers. Deals that were supposed to prove the Sussexes were serious creators, not just famous names trying to cash in, were failing to produce work that could hold up in the market. The legal and business structure had been carefully built, but the income and success meant to support it were not materializing. It was during that period that Doria moved into the Montecito home full-time. Reports described her role in ways that sounded practical as much as personal. She had become, in one account, the mother figure of the household, actively involved with Archie and Lily, and present in the daily running of the home in a way that went far beyond a grandmother simply dropping by. She brought steady presence to the children and a sense of order to the house that sources suggested had been missing before. Several accounts also said Harry found something deeply stabilizing in her presence. One source put it in a strikingly direct way. He did not get that warmth from his own side of the family. That is not a throwaway comment. It points clearly to what Doria was providing and why her role in the household had become so important.
Loose cannon.
Daddy doesn't trust him. That's why.
Because Daddy's king.
Every time Daddy gives him a little hug, he has to read about it.
For 18 months, Doria was a steady presence inside the home while remaining almost completely out of public view. No appearances, no quotes, no footage, just there. She was deeply involved in a household that was trying to rebuild a business, protect a major public image, and manage a marriage that several sources said was under ongoing strain. By all accounts from inside the house, she played an essential role. Then with Love, Meghan Season 1 came out. The show was built entirely around Meghan's image, her warmth, her home life, her values, and the identity she has carefully shaped for years. If anyone should have had a meaningful place in that setting, it was Doria, the woman described as the backbone of the household. The person Harry reportedly found grounding, and the mother living in the home where the show was filmed. Yet she appeared only briefly in the background, with no real part in the story. Even that felt notable in a show so deliberate about every detail. Then Season 2 arrived, and she was gone. Mentioned once, but not seen on screen. No explanation from the production. No comment from Meghan about why the woman described as the emotional center of the home was missing from the main project carrying her name and image. Meghan had full creative control over every frame of With Love, Meghan. Nothing in that show is there by chance, and nothing is left out by accident. The look is managed down to the cookware on the counter and the flowers on the table. Her own mother does not simply disappear from that world unless someone makes that call. The woman described by insiders as the backbone of the household was removed from the visible record, and that record was being shaped by someone who understood exactly what that choice would say. Long before any report of a falling out appeared, the signs were already sitting in plain sight. They were not hidden in legal paperwork or tucked away in anonymous quotes. They were visible in public posts and presentation choices managed with great care by Meghan's team. Choices that only stand out when you compare them with the story that had been built around Doria for the previous 7 years.
Relationships. Observers told us a single phrase used to describe Ragland has taken on huge significance.
On Mother's Day 2025, Meghan posted on one of the most watched Instagram accounts in the world. That account is not casual. It is used to mark moments with emotional impact, the kind of posts her team knows will get picked up, shared, and closely read. At that level, every post is part personal message and part brand strategy. That is simply how a public image like hers is managed. But she did not mention Doria at all. No name, no photo, no small reference. Not even a broad line that could quietly include her, the kind of safe message people use when they want to acknowledge someone without making it obvious. There was none of that. Instead, she highlighted 2 $64 as-ever scented candles, including one named for Lily, as a tribute to her children. Her children were included. Her mother was not. And this happened on the one day of the year set aside to honor mothers. For a team that manages a global brand so carefully, that does not look accidental. It looks deliberate. Then came the Netflix moment. In With Love, Meghan, a show Meghan made and fully controls, she described her mother as a free spirit. On the surface, it sounds warm and affectionate, like a daughter using a soft and loving phrase. But people close to the Sussex circle reportedly saw it differently. According to insiders, it was a subtle repositioning, a quiet but noticeable way of showing that Meghan and Doria viewed parenting and family in very different ways. In a show where Meghan is presented as warm, steady, hands-on, and deeply rooted in home life, calling her mother a free spirit does not land in the same emotional space. It reads less like praise and more like contrast.
Hosted Meghan Markle's secret war with mother Doria Ragland after Netflix dig, talking with Dan Wootton about how Meghan can't.
Putting Doria in that role sets her outside the values the show is trying to represent. It gently suggests that she belongs to a different way of living and a different way of thinking about family. The wording sounds kind, but the contrast is still there. Then Season 2 made that message harder to ignore. Her absence did not look like a scheduling issue, a runtime cut, or a routine editing decision. In a show where every shot is carefully planned, leaving someone out is also a clear decision. Taken one by one, these moments can be brushed aside. The Mother's Day silence, the free spirit label, the disappearance in Season 2 could each be explained on their own. Family relationships are complicated, and public image does not always match private life. But placed in order, inside a story where every public move has been carefully managed since 2017, they stop looking random. In a narrative shaped by one of the most polished celebrity communications operations of the modern era, they begin to look like a pattern. It was a trail being written out in public, step by step, and eventually that trail led somewhere. After 18 months inside the Sussex home, Doria left. This was not just a visit ending or a quiet shift back to her own life in Los Angeles. She left with suitcases, and several sources described it not as a casual exit, but as the final point of something that had been building for a while. Accounts of what came before were strikingly similar. They described exhaustion, a household that had become harder and harder to live in, and a mother-daughter relationship that had worn down to the point where living closely together no longer worked. The warmth Harry had reportedly relied on, and the stability Doria had brought during the business setbacks of 2024, seemed to have reached its limit after 18 months of daily life inside a home under constant strain.
I mean, I'd argue that the 15 mentions of Prince Harry's hang down in Spare and Meghan's twerking at the Beyonce.
One insider summed it up in a telling way. Doria had become worn down by her daughter's constant complaints and ongoing drama. That is not the language of a family struggling mainly because of outside pressure. It points to something breaking down from within. Not because of tabloids, not because of the palace, and not because of the outside forces the Sussex story has long blamed for its troubles, but because of what was happening inside the relationship itself. That matters because these were two women the public had been taught to see as each other's strongest source of support. Then came the moment that reportedly brought it to a head. Meghan, standing at the door, said, "Don't leave me," as Doria walked out with her suitcases. Doria left anyway. That is not a minor detail. This was the mother presented in Meghan's own documentary, on Meghan's own platform, and within a brand built around warmth, family, and real connection as the most important person in her life. And yet she still chose to walk away. What came next was a silence so complete that it became meaningful on its own. From Doria, that silence fits her pattern. She has never spoken publicly, and on its own that proves nothing beyond the fact that she does not give public comments. But the silence from Meghan's side is different. This is not a team that stays quiet when private claims matter. It sued the Mail on Sunday over a personal letter. It fought tabloid intrusion in British court. It launched legal action in multiple places to control how information about the Sussex family was handled. And when GB News aired Carol Malone's false claim in December 2025 that Doria had been jailed, the response was immediate. Hundreds of complaints were filed with Ofcom, and a live on-air apology followed.
I stated that Thomas Markle, the Duchess of Sussex's father, brought Meghan up while her mother, Doria Ragland.
This became a national story, and the Sussex team was clearly involved in shaping what happened next. When a TV broadcast made a false claim about Doria, they acted fast. But when Doria left the house, they said nothing. That only seems inconsistent until you see what they were really trying to protect. They pushed back on the GB News story because a false criminal accusation could damage the image they still needed Doria to carry, the loving, loyal mother who could not be questioned. But they stayed quiet about her leaving because telling the full truth would have done more harm than saying nothing at all. A team that knows exactly when to respond and when to stay silent made a careful choice. And that choice points to where the real danger was not in what a TV host said, but in what that front door in Montecito saw the day Doria decided she was finished. One version of this is simple. A mother and daughter had a painful private break under intense public pressure, and the silence comes from sadness. That explanation is possible, but it is not the only one the facts support. If you look at the full pattern, one clear line runs through all of it. This does not look like just a story about grief or a family falling apart under worldwide attention, even though that is the version likely to be used if this is ever discussed in public. The pressure was real, and the scrutiny was real. But those things do not explain the corporate filings. They do not explain the Mother's Day post. They do not explain the gap between the jam jar and the Delaware registration, the gap between the Season 2 absence and the Free Spirit description, or the difference between a machine that rushed to answer a TV claim and one that stayed silent at the front door.
Of Miss Ragland, that she raised her daughter and that she has never been in prison or jail. I apologize.
What ties all of this together is a steady pattern that has played out for years. Doria was lifted up when the brand needed credibility. She was there for the wedding, the documentary, the jam jar, and the image of the caring mother who made criticism seem harsh. She was also placed inside the business structure when the operation needed legal and financial support, with a trusted name attached to official filings. Later, when the business projects were failing, she was brought into the home as the household searched for something solid to hold on to. But once her needs seemed greater than her value to the arrangement, she was gone. No public explanation. No acknowledgement. No statement from a team skilled enough to release one instantly if it helped them. This follows the same pattern Samantha Markle pointed to years before these separate events happened. She was mocked, brushed aside, and treated like background noise from a bitter relative who could not accept her sister's rise. The Sussex machine did not even have to tear her down. Much of the media did that on its own because the easy storyline was already in place, and the harder one required real effort. Then Bauer backed up that pattern. And then the central figure in Meghan's personal story quietly packed her bags and left. Doria Ragland has stood at the center of one of the most watched, debated, and written about media stories of the last decade. It is a story built on claims of honesty, authenticity, and speaking your truth. It has been told through the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the memoir, the podcast, the lifestyle brand, and the TV show built around her daughter's name. Yet through all of it, Doria has never spoken publicly. Not once. Not a single word. A team that built its identity around the power of personal storytelling has never put the most important person in that story in front of a microphone. That does not look like protection. It looks like control.
Meghan got fed up with this because she wants her to do exactly what she wants when she...
Here is the key point about control. It only becomes necessary when the truth inside could change everything. Samantha is still speaking. Doria is still silent. The gap between those two facts is where the real story has always been. Go back to Windsor in May 2018. Doria walks alone across the castle grounds, calm, graceful, and watched by the whole world. At the time, people saw exactly what they were supposed to see, a loving mother standing by her daughter on the biggest day of her life. It looked like proof that the public story was true. Now look at that image again. Look at it knowing what the corporate records show. Look at it knowing how family members described things in private. Look at it knowing that over the next 6 years, Doria would be raised up, placed inside the business structure, used when needed, and then quietly left behind. And through every stage of that, she never said one public word. The image is still the same. What changes is what you now understand about it. That is what happens when a public story is built around a carefully shaped version of a real person. It works perfectly until someone starts looking at the framework underneath. And once you see that framework, you cannot ignore it. Samantha Markle said it first, and she paid heavily for it. Bauer later backed it up. Then Doria walked out of a Montecito home and revealed something else without saying a word. Whatever the truth was between these two women, it was not the version the public was sold. What that truth really is, only two people know. One is still talking, the other has never spoken at all. And after everything, that silence may be the loudest part of the whole story. Doria has stayed silent for 10 years. The media spent years mocking the one person who kept asking why. And a communications team that reacts fiercely to a false claim on television said absolutely nothing when the most important figure in the story walked out the door. What you have just seen is what happens when you stop accepting the surface story and start examining the structure beneath it. There is a playlist on screen now. Every video in it follows that same approach. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to spot the next carefully crafted version before everyone else does.